What up, ladies and gentlemen, to another awesome interview. I'm joined today with an awesome guest, right? Um, Someone from New York, from Stockholm, from all over, making very incredible Americana, R&B, soul. Fits into a lot of categories, I would say. Music, as a songwriter, as a guitarist, as a singer, as a lot of different things. So, welcome, Mrs. Nikki O'Neill, and how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm in Chicago and it's cold and snowy. So,
Yeah, I'm in Georgia and we actually have snow, which is kind of crazy.
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We had a snow day for like the first time in a couple, probably 5, 6 years.
Oh,
So it's been really nice.
okay. It's nice to like look out the window. It looks pretty that way. Is
It
it?
really is. I love all the white, you know. It's kind of sad that it's about to go away, but we enjoyed it while it lasted, one day.
Yeah.
So tell me about the first thing that really caught my eye was that you got the Creative Catalyst grant, which seems like a really big deal. I mean, that's like a I've looked it up, done some research. That's pretty massive. So, would you mind telling us like the process of receiving that and your reaction to getting it?
Yeah, sure. It's the first grant that I've ever received. I learned about it through other musicians in Chicago. They told me about this a year ago that, hey, the Illinois Arts Council, they have these grants for musicians. It could be individual artists or it could be, sometimes if it's say a theater company or, something bigger, but it could be for individuals as well. And unfortunately, last year I missed the deadline by like a day or something. I didn't get my materials together that fast. So next time around, they had a new grant, and it was even better. Uh, and so yeah, it was the first time I applied for something like this. So I don't know if you've ever uh, been in like the nonprofit world or writing grants or something, but there's like two parts to it. So there's a narrative, and there's a budget. And with the narrative, you have to explain. Well, it depends what type of grant. So this one was called a Creative Catalyst grant, and what they mean by catalyst is this grant is supposed to help you forward your career in a way, your career or aspect of your artistry. So it could be for sculptors, dancers, different people in the arts. And so you write this narrative and briefly explain your background, where your career has been moving so far, and what this grant would be able, what you hope it would be able to do for you. And then you got to have a timeline. Like, okay, I'm, for instance, me working on an album, so this is going to happen in these months, and then it's going to get mixed and mastered, and then this is going to happen. And then the other side of it is a budget. So you have to, write down what everything is going to cost and find out from the people you're going to be working with, whether mixing engineer, mastering engineer, graphic designer, and
Excuse me.
start getting in touch with them. Bless you. Start getting in touch with them and asking, what things would cost, and so you get super specific. Um, and everything had to be in Illinois. So for me, I had recently moved from LA. In 2020, I moved from LA. So I didn't know a lot of people. Like the, previously with previous albums, it was a crew of people from LA that I worked with, whether it was the album art or the recording, the mastering and things like that. So and photographer and videographer and all of that. So with this album, it was like completely new people and kind of a new band also. We'd played for a couple of years, but or like a year or two, but it's still you never did an album together. So it was exciting, but also a bit nervous. How's this going to work? And all these people I've never met, but it worked out great. And yeah, but it was like a prerequisite of the grant was you had to work with people that were based in Illinois because it's like Illinois tax dollars that are funding this grant. So. But it was extremely helpful. It's recording an album and getting it done right and with a style of music that I do, where it's very much like you playing with a band and you're all in the same room, as opposed to doing a lot of maybe electronic music or working a lot on your, with a laptop and overdubbing stuff. This is, yeah, everybody in one room. You got to dial in the right sounds, and you're working with, yeah, an engineer, mixer, mastering engineer. Sometimes they're different people. Uh, Sometimes musicians, you want to pay them for the time they put in being in a studio for a whole day versus getting some work somewhere else. So it can, costs can go up really fast. So um, even when you're very mindful and trying to not be, frittering away money. So the grant was incredibly helpful.
Well, I'm definitely glad, and I think that grants should certainly be more accessible and more available to musicians just everywhere, especially when like journalism and making music and managing music and going on tour, all those profits kind of declining, and
Yeah,
it's just making it a tougher scene for everyone.
absolutely. And I think some states are maybe better with letting artists know that grants are out there, or maybe they can provide more grants. When I was in LA, I didn't hear much about that. Not for musicians. Maybe if you were in classical music or jazz, uh, not so much for popular music. And it's really competitive out there. There's so many artists and musicians. So it was fantastic to come out here to Chicago and learn about that there are all these kinds of grants and opportunities.
Of
So,
course, yeah. And you talked about your new band. What I find really interesting is that this was a collaborative record in a sense, right? With
mhm.
everyone kind of working together. How was that experience with completely new people or that you've only known for a short amount of time?
Yeah. So when I did my second record, I've done three. It's three records, including the new one that's coming March 14. But with the second record, it was a band where we had played together. I bring in the songs, so I write them, but then I like the people in the band to come up with their own parts, and we kind of arrange the songs together, and then we road test them. We get out and play live, because my experience was that things just sounded a lot better when we record as much everybody together in one room. And then if there's some overdubs, certain vocals or certain instrument or so, that's totally fine. But to have the essential like rhythm tracks and stuff, everybody in one room, I really liked that experience, so I wanted to do that again. And with Chicago, so we moved. My husband and I, husband plays drums with me in my band, and we moved from LA to Chicago right in the middle of the pandemic during lockdown, like November 2020.
It's crazy.
And yeah, it was. And we got here, and of course, there's like no gigs, nobody's playing anywhere, and venues are closed, and it was hard to meet people. So it took a little while, it took maybe half a year or close to a year before we started meeting people, and then that I could put a band together. And once I did, then they were learning the songs off of my first two records and a bunch of covers, depending on what kind of venue you're playing. If you're like going to play for 2, 3 hours somewhere, then chances are you're going to have to do some of that, like songs you haven't written. And yeah, we did that for a while, and then it got to a point where I thought, you know what, to get us to the next stage, and this is like familiar now. I got to give them new music, and we should do an album together. And that really sparked the enthusiasm with everybody, and so I started writing songs a little bit at the end of 2023, but mostly 2024. So the album's like all new material. There's nothing left over from like stuff that I've written before. And Yeah, because everybody was really into it. And even though some of them make their living off of playing music, so they're not with me only, they're, you know, playing other gigs and stuff, but they really put their heart and soul into it and coming up with parts. And so it became a really great experience. There was like, really enthusiastic energy in the studio, and um, so it turned out fine. And the engineer we worked with, he was turned out great to work with. It was very like an easy, happy experience. Um, and He also helped us out playing bass because we ended up switching bass players like at one point when we were going to record the remaining 9 songs of the album. But he's a fantastic bass player, so it just sparked everybody's energy even more. So I was lucky, I guess.
For sure. I'm glad that that was available to you, you know? And I mean, I'm glad that this whole thing happened because I think it's a new sense of creativity and kind of uncharted territory, which is definitely beneficial to the music, at least in my opinion.
Very much. And I think, what every album you do, or at least in my case, the environment has rubbed off on me a little bit. So when I did my second record, it was in LA. And I mean, I had my tastes and my style of singing and my like style of writing was established, but there was a big, like an not a big, a small Americana community in LA. But I was hanging out with them a lot, and the other guitarist, he came from Nashville, so there's a little bit more twang and on that record, even though there was soul also. But with this one, yeah, it took a little while before I started writing. Moving to Chicago, like I said, it was the pandemic. Couldn't meet any musicians. I don't really feel up to writing. And people would ask, "Are you writing about the pandemic?" And I was like, "No, I don't know. I don't want to. What am I going to write about? The shortage of toilet paper?" Like, I don't know. It was just, I felt busy living it, being in the midst of living it. Other people were really great about like writing about being in the middle of that, but for me, I ended up taking a break, and it took a little while to actually get myself back into writing. But the nice thing was, like I said, I wanted Chicago to kind of rub off on me, and the experiences, the people I met, the music I took in, things that I was exposed to musically. uh I wanted that to happen, and it did. This album's very much about those impressions.
Awesome. And Chicago, right? Tell me about the local
Mhm.
scene. This is one of my favorite parts of getting to interview local musicians. This is getting to learn about the more niche scenes. And I've never been to Chicago. My mom went to college there, but I've
Oh,
never
okay.
been. And so
You should
my
go.
I want to go to LA. I want to go to Chicago. I want to go to so many different places, but high school kind of doesn't really mix with traveling too much. So,
Yeah, you
but
gotta wait.
oh yeah, sadly. But tell me about like the local scene, the venues. Is it easy to get gigs? Um, how is that like?
Um, I think it depends. In one way, I'm still learning about some scenes, because sometimes venues close down, especially after the pandemic. Something new comes up. Sometimes there are venues that are not like traditional clubs, which I think a lot of musicians have been seeking out in the last several years. Because if you only depended on clubs, um, they can be tough to get into. They don't always pay very well. And if you're splitting that between 4 or 5 people, so uh, So there's always like these like, untraditional venues that pop up and that you learn about. It might be an art gallery that does live music, or a store or a record store, uh, or there might be like libraries that do concerts and things like that. So yeah, there's always, putting your feelers out there and seeing what's going on. Chicago's a big city, so I'm learning about that. um, Compared to LA, and I have experience with New York, LA, New York, there's a lot of like pay to play places, where meaning that you have to buy a certain number of tickets. And if you don't sell them, then you've basically, you know, bought these tickets, you spent the money. Uh, there's a lot of that, especially the more like popular venues, or in more like popular areas where there's a lot of foot traffic. And so there's that in Chicago too, but I find that there's I don't know, people are really, really into live music in certain areas. They want to stay. They don't just show up for the set that their friend is playing. They might stay for like the other sets. In LA, it could be very much like, okay, one artist, they bring their friends, they play their 45-minute set, and then the room empties. And then the next artist does the same thing. And so I found in Chicago, it seems like in certain places, much greater interest for live music, discovering artists, tipping the artists, and in places, yeah, opportunities to play, venues, festivals, block parties, and like I said, the clubs, but also untraditional venues. It just seemed like there was more. So that's been a positive experience for me. I don't know how it is for others, but I only have experience from like L.A., New York, which are pretty brutal, and then I have friends who have gone to Nashville and tried their luck there, and I think it's kind of the same thing.
Well,
Uh,
I'm definitely glad. I know that when I was in Nashville, I did a rowing tournament there, but we didn't really get to explore. And then we went back for Christmas, just for like 2 days to look
okay.
around. And I wanted to see some of the clubs, but it was kind of like if you wanted to get a gig, it was either at the Blue Room, which is like only for really established acts.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you
the
had to be,
Bluebird.
yeah,
Yeah,
like it's awesome, but it's tight and you got to be like big to play it.
yeah,
Or you got to play like the really crazy alcohol filled
yeah,
bars that are like
um,
5 stories tall. Yeah, on Fifth Street and stuff, on Broadway. And
yeah,
that feels so barbaric for
yeah.
like I
No,
enjoyed it, but I mean it's kind of crazy.
yeah, I think it might be okay when you like do it as like one time. It's like, oh, okay, wow, I was on, in Nashville on Broadway, with all the like hammered, yeah, bachelorettes and stuff, and the honky tonks there. Uh, Doing that constantly is probably, it's gonna,
Mm.
yeah, eat
I
at your
respect it.
spirits a
I
bit.
I respect it. I mean, if you're those bands that do the honky tonk day out and day night, I mean
Yeah.
they've got it down,
it
and
takes a
it's
certain takes a certain person, and I think you can't be too sensitive. You can't be like, oh, I want to do my art and these people are just hammered and they're not listening. I mean, if that's how you always feel, you're going to be miserable there, and I'm more of that kind of person. I'd be
yeah.
miserable. So, but yeah, the tough thing with Chicago, but it's probably like with other cities, bigger cities, is there's just a lot of cover bands and tribute bands. And so people can fill a club by doing a David Bowie tribute. And then the next day they go somewhere else and they play a Tom Petty tribute. Where, for instance, there's a band called Tributosaurus, and they play the really big festivals. I don't know how much they make, but yeah, they're a big band and they play like the really big festivals. And their thing is that they morph into another band, a different band with every show. So they know a ton of songs, and they can play them like down to the letter. So like every little detail, they got it dialed in. And so people love that. And they're happy. And I guess, I mean, they're playing with musicians they like and they're getting paid really well. And apart from that, they do their own music and stuff. But yeah, it's challenging to do original music. And for that, I think you need to find out, yeah, not just rely on clubs, but it might be other ways to where people gather and would be open to hearing original stuff. And you have to find out where those places are, and they might change very rapidly. So
Course. I
yeah.
honestly think that the issue is like I live in Atlanta, and the smallest clubs I had been to, up until this year would like arenas, honestly. Like seeing some big acts.
Okay.
And then I had my first real rock show at the Fox Theater, which is, there's a bunch of Fox theaters everywhere. They tend to be the same capacity, like 6,000 people. Still
Yeah.
massive. Like, but that didn't wrap my mind. I thought that was small. And then getting into the scene and meeting more wonderful people like you kind of you have to be in the know. And now thankfully I know so many of the local in Atlanta. It's more emo and screamo and hardcore adjacent music.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, that's like the big bustling scene right now. But once you get to know these people, you find all the really cool, like alleyways where they play shows and 50 person, not even a club, like a room where they
Yeah.
play shows, and then you get to go to see more shows at 1,000 person clubs. At 600. Like I saw Dinosaur Jr. at a 650 person club.
Oh, cool.
Like
That's
in
awesome.
in Atlanta, they have these really small areas where you can see them, but you have to be in the know.
Yeah.
Like
And that's the thing. You have to constantly be looking. And sometimes I'll go on forums just to see what people are suggesting. Because, yeah, it might be a temporary makeshift venue. But I think to try to play original music, yeah, you can't just rely on the clubs because the clubs are going to be like, okay, what draw do you have? It was like, oh, it's not a very big draw because I'm kind of new to Chicago. Well, okay, then yeah, maybe we have Sunday at 12 o'clock at noon. Well, that's kind of hard to get people to get to that. So um, yeah, it's a mix. I mean, in a way, I feel lucky with some opportunities, but yeah, it's like, well, how do you get from playing the 2 to 3 hour gig where you have to play a lot of covers to, where you can fill a club and people are just there to hear
yeah,
your stuff. And um, yeah, it's a process.
I honestly, I wish that there would be a way for people to find DIY clubs and small venues. Now the issue is like, people always try to block others because they want to be special. I forgot the word for it. They especially with this like emo and like Midwest music, where people tend to not tell their friends about it and not tell
Hmm.
their teachers about it and their parents about it because they want to be a little special. Which
Yeah.
like that's kind of the human condition, but that's almost ruining the music industry. Like my friends don't know where the local clubs are. I have to tell them. But if I tell them, then they know, and then they tell their friends, and then it spreads. And I think
Yeah.
that's
And
a
then people
really
don't
good
think it's
thing.
cool anymore.
That's the issue. There's this
Yeah.
like stigma, and people. It's honestly, I think the issue is just people. There's two types of people in live music. One that just really love live music, and the other that liking live music.
Yeah.
They enjoy the process of liking live music rather than the actual music itself, which is so counterintuitive, And I think it's ruining the club space, at least here in Atlanta and maybe other places. Like I'm sure it's with Los Angeles, when you guys have the Lodge Room and Soda Bar and all these different types of places where you have to be in the know, kinda.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, and with some venues, yeah, I guess there's like music lovers and music listeners. The
Yeah.
music lovers are the ones that like seek out, places they want to hear live music. They are looking, and others they're just much more casual about it. And you want to try and find the music lovers. Sometimes it's also uh, hard, like when you're a certain age group.
Oh, yeah.
Like say, like my age, there's a lot of people, they have kids at this point, or they're not going to go out on a Tuesday at 11. Like I can occasionally do it, but it feels like, God damn, it's late. But but
It's the same for me too,
so
because I'm 15,
yeah.
right? So the Dinosaur Junior show is 21 plus, and that was a
Uh,
pain to get into. Now, thank God that most venues, if you're on guest list, they really don't care what age you are, so you can get into shows. But
that's
like,
good.
there's some incredible venues in Atlanta, like the bar venues that get constantly the best shows, and they're on weekdays and they're 21 plus, and it kills me. It kills me.
I
But
don't, yeah, I don't have any advice to give
no,
there
I
because
just
I
got to get
remember
older.
when I was your age. I mean, I always looked like way younger than my actual age, so I was always stopped by bouncers, and
Yeah.
it's
I think that
like
the
no way for me to get a fake ID or something.
oh
Is yeah,
yeah, and now it's even worse, but the thing is just thankfully with the DIY scene, they don't typically care about age, and it's just kind of, yeah, do you have a crisp $10 to hand over or something? That's really the if you get into the show or not, rather
yeah,
than what's your age, who are you with. So I think it's much easier. But I'd like to get on topic a little bit more. I'm sorry about that. On
no,
your
it's okay.
music. And so what were your inspirations coming to this new album?
So there's a mix of stuff that I've always listened to that's always been with me. So
Hmm.
like ever since I was a kid, my mom played Al Green.
Uh,
She's a huge fan of that. So that sound feels like it's almost in my DNA. I love it. I loved how the band played behind him on those classic albums. I love how he sings. I mean, there's no way I can sing like that. Nobody can. But that sound, it's earthy, but it's heavenly at the same time. It's that mix between like the gospel and these musicians that came up in the church, but it's also got a groove and it's like earthy and physical. So that's always appealed to me. And it's there. It's probably, trickled down to some of the tracks. Um, and also, I grew up with rock. So when I was a teenager and moved to Sweden, well, I moved to Sweden when I was 7, but like later on, going through school, co- coming up in the grades and being a teenager, a lot of my friends were into hard rock and metal, and that's when I got a guitar. And I mean, you don't hear, there's no metal that you can hear on this album or any of my albums, but I love guitars. I love a good riff. I may be old fashioned that way. But yeah, there's part of that. There's a song called I Just Knew that starts off with a guitar riff, and there's in the middle of the song, it's kind of a gospel influenced rock tune, but it's got like this twin guitar solo because I just thought it'd be really fun to like
yeah.
record that with like me and the other guitarist. It, Me doing a melody and he was doing a harmony on top of that. It's just so much fun. So yeah, so that like rock and soul that I've loved all my life, it's there. But also when I came to Chicago, there were a couple of things. One was during lockdown when you couldn't get out or there was like, nobody's playing anywhere. Every musician got some kind of project or two that they were doing. In my case, I was checking out uh, a woman guitarist named Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who like a few years ago she got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and she passed away long ago. But she was, let's see, there's this artist Celise, African American guitarist. I think she's played with Lizzo, if I'm not mistaken. But she's hugely inspired by Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and and she was just this very cool guitarist who, like, I mean, lived long ago, wasn't gospel, but she played this electric guitar in SG, and she played it with a swagger and just badass solos, confident and a bit showy and flashy. And she inspired a lot of people like Keith Richards. Elvis was really into her. And so, yeah. So I decided to check out some of her playing and like learn one of her solos. It was hard, actually. She had a lot of jazz chops, and yeah, it was challenging, but it was fun challenge. So that kind of rubbed off on me. You might be able to hear that on a song like "I Wish the Sun Could Shine on Me," uh, which is written in a little bit like has a little bit of an old timey style to it. Um, it's just me singing and playing acoustic guitar, and then there's the drummer playing brushes, and then there's some like gospel-y kind of vocal harmonies that come in. Um, so yeah, Sister Rosetta Tharpe was like there, and she lived in Chicago for a good while. So that was kind of a Chicago impression. Another thing was I started working at a place called the Old Town School of Folk Music, and that's the biggest community art school in the US. And so they have, I think, 300 or 500 different classes going on every week. They
It's
have,
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. There's like music and some dance, and it's for adults, it's for kids. There's group classes, there's like band classes if you want to play 90s or like punk rock or just LGBTQ writers, but in an ensemble, or play the songs of Boy Genius or something. There's a band and that you could be in, and so that's for adults. But there's a very big folk music tradition too that's been around since like 1957 the school started. And back then they would basically invite blues masters or bluegrass masters to this huge room, and there were maybe like 50 or 100 people that are sitting there with like banjos or guitars or ukuleles, and they want to learn how to play that style that this blues master is doing. And instead of writing this down on sheet music with notation, the school had a way to explain orally like what's going on. And they like wrote out symbols in their own way. Uh, and and that way people could like learn how to play a bit of that. So the school has always had this like way of teaching communal music, and one specific thing they have that I've never seen anywhere else is something called second half. It's free and it's open to the public. And it's basically after the classes, people can gather. It's every night. And it doesn't matter what level you are. You could be a total newbie or you could be like more advanced. But everybody gathers in one room, one big room, and play songs that are like American classic roots music songs. So it might be like worker songs, union songs, spirituals, murder ballads, like country style kind of things. Um, and that happens every night, and some of it is online as well, and it's free and it's open to the public. So I got to teach there, and I still do like one night a week, and I'm part of this second half thing. So I never really grew up with folk music. When I was a teen, I was into like rock, soul. My mom listened to some jazz. There's some classical music that went on. Then later I became an obsessive Prince fan. But folk, yeah, there was like apart from a few songs, it was kind of like Bob Dylan was never in our world at home. Uh, and so yeah, so that was getting exposed to that. It kind of trickled down into the album as well because there's two songs that are acoustic. Like I said, one's a little bit influenced by like a Sister Rosetta Tharpe type thing, and then there's a song called Newcomer Blues, which is yeah, an acoustic, slightly blues folk, staple singers maybe
Uh-huh.
inspired thing. So yeah, that's how Chicago is rubbed off on me. So there's like music I've always loved, but also this new music. kind of rootsy. Um, and yeah, but I also I want to point out I really don't want to make retro music or some pastiche where you're like imitating the past down to every detail. That feels stale to me, or
It
others
is.
can do that. Others can do that really well, and they've made great careers, and that's awesome. If it feels good for you, then that's great that you found that. For me, it doesn't feel right. So even if I love the kind of stuff I do, and it's kind of maybe classic sounding, uh, I don't want it to sound like, yeah, an imitation where I'm gonna like, yeah, put my hair up like Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
And I mean, as much as she was a badass. She was
She was
great.
awesome.
Yeah, really talented. But I know she tried to like, I'm gonna do reggae, and her label were like, no, you
Yeah.
can't.
Well,
So
we're getting to the end of our time because
okay.
I don't pay for Zoom. I do want to say that I think I'm gonna sadly have to move over to a paid platform. So maybe one day we'll get to redo this because I think the audio quality isn't the best and I gotta figure it out. But thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
me.
thank you. Thanks for yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to
It really
you and to
was.
learn a little bit about Atlanta and your
Yeah.
experiences. And
I hope you get to come
yeah,
to Atlanta.
yeah, I'd love to do that because I mean James Brown, if I think like I don't know if he like no, he wasn't born there, but
No,
I
but
know
big
he
presence. Elton
yeah.
John has a house here. There's a lot of stuff going
Okay.
on.
I think Butch Walker is also
Yeah, yeah,
somebody
yeah. Butch
who
Walker's here. Yeah, yeah.
works there or worked there a
He's
lot.
big here.
So yeah, so
Well,
it'd be cool to
again, thank
go.
you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.